Hello, everyone. It's 10 Types, joined by Uncommon Fossil with the Reasonably Effective podcast. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a few things. As you can see on my screen, if you're watching the video, I'm looking at the Scarlet and Violet cards, which are out. But we're not going to be talking about those or Crown Zenith because we're going to be talking about some other stuff. We're going to be talking about Pokemon V's, where you have a fun little game, and we also are going to be taking a look at a Pokemon. We're going to be taking a look at. Well, you'll see when we get there. But so Uncommon Fossil, how has your week been with Pokemon?
All right, been going pretty good. Playing some PTCGO and playing some live, and obviously we have the Crown Zenith is out and available somewhat. So it's going well. So playing a few decks here and there, and been playing my favorite deck, Ice Rider for VMAX for sure. How's it going for you?
It's been going pretty good. I've been messing around with Crown Zenith. I've been playing a lot with the new Luxray, which is really fun. Kind of not great, but it's worked okay. I was nervous it was going to be completely trash, and it's been a bit better than that, certainly. So it's fun. I think it has serious potential. I think it'll also be better with the Scarlet and Violet because it works well with stage twos, I think. Also, when Marnie rotates, that'll be good. Wait, is Marnie's rotating, right?
Yes, Marnie's rotating. We have Judge, which is for hand disruption, right? Because within it, you're drawing two cards, and with Marnie, you lose those two cards. So,
Yeah. So I think it's going to be better, like post rotation, post Scarlet and Violet stuff. But for now, it's still pretty solid, and I think has a place in the meta. But I think it's time that we move into our first segment, which I don't think we have a name for, but it's going to be like a quiz type thing where one person says the name of an attack or an ability in standard format, and the other person tries to guess it. So I'll go first. I have an interesting ability that I think you should be able to guess. The
okay.
name of the ability is Pitch a Pyukumuku.
All right. Well, I appreciate that because the name is in it there. So Pukamuku.
Yes, that is correct.
And we are going easy, medium, hard, at least in theory. So that fits under easy. So one for me. I will propose a name for this segment of just guess that Pokemon. Guess that card, right? Which is also last week's 20 questions fits under that if we want a broad category.
Yeah.
All right, so I have an easy one that not quite as easy as that, but I expect you to get it, and you'll be to your disgrace if you don't. So it's an ability, and it's Deep Forest Camo.
So that is Decidueye's ability from Darkness Blade, well, or Shining Fates.
Right. Yep. Both. And what was your experience with the card? So I'm giving you a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. My greatest Pokemon accomplishment, other than of course my very successful YouTube channel, is the Pog Championship, the 2021, I guess it
Yeah.
was, which was the low level world championship, you could say, online. Relatively weak replacement. I was able to finish 10th, being carried solely by Decidueye's ability to pretty much auto win every matchup, and so that was quite nice for me. So,
Right. You did well. You picked the right deck, but you also piloted it properly. So good job there.
yeah, you didn't do well.
No,
Tell
I
us a bit
didn't.
about.
I did it also. I did Luke Metal, which kind of I wasn't sure what to do. I enjoyed Luke Metal, and it was about to rotate, so I went with that. I did not make day two at all, so I think I finished with a winning record. I'm not sure. I think it was 9 rounds. I think I went 5-4. I played even after
I think it was
I
10
was.
rounds.
Was it?
Yeah,
Okay, I think I'm in 5-4. So, but it was well short of day two.
yeah. But so I'll propose my next one, which is going to be an attack this time,
Okay.
and it's the attack Spit Innocently.
Oh, spit innocently. Oh no. Okay, that is familiar for
Yeah,
sure.
it's one that sees play, I guess. But I'm not sure if you'll be able to guess
I
this one.
should know this. And I've talked when we talked like at other times. We both primarily play online, and I don't normally like if I was in playing IRL. I think I'd name the attacks, or the attacks would get said here. You just kind of click the button, and you know whether it's the first or second attack. And you kind of ignore that. But spit innocently, is that? I think it can hit the bench. Is it Cramorant V?
No, you are very, very close. It is Cramorant from the Lost Zone Cramorant.
Oh, okay. So, all right, I was in
Yeah.
the right family, but wrong generation, so to speak.
Uh,
Although not, I shouldn't say generation because that's an official Pokemon term. So
yeah, yeah. So almost, but I guess that's a if you get that's a tiebreaker. I'd say you're very
it was
close.
close. Okay, so we'll see. This next one for me is also an attack, and it's swinging chain.
Oh, that's Delmai. I think that's Delmai's VMAX.
It is, and I figured you've heard me talk about it. I played it. I don't think you've ever played it, but it's a decent attack on it on a decent Pokemon, not a great Pokemon. It does 30 damage per grass energy attached to any of your opponent's Pokemon, so it can hit into the bench too. So it's useful later in the game sometimes to close things out. So
Yeah, and then so yeah, that's a I've heard you talk about that one enough, and I don't know, I might have played with it, but I it's one that stands out to me. I think I'm not sure why, but it
it,
does.
it's a big anchor, and I think the wheel for steering is on is the graphic. So there is a big
Yeah,
anchor and chain on the Pokemon.
yeah. Okay, so I have one more. Actually, I might have another one that we could do if we decide we want that. But this one this attack name. It's an attack, so
Okay.
it made me think of you and some of the decks you play. The attack name is Garbage Attack.
Garbage attack. Wow. All right. That's rough. That's what you think of me in the decks I play, huh?
Uh,
um, you were the one that came up with the deck and named it Bad Drill and said it fit the deck. But
yeah.
garbage attack. So is that Garbodor VMAX?
No,
All right.
it's actually a card. I don't know if you played this, but it's Porygon 2, the one that does
Okay.
the Lost Zone, more for each tool in the Lost Zone.
Okay. A little, but not much. I mean, obviously it can pair with Rotom V. Although my primary Rotom V deck does not play it. I need to put that into it though.
Yeah.
All right, good. And so I didn't do that well. One out of three. So let's see. You've already won this, but I have an ability for the last Pokemon, and it is weather reading.
For the reading? Oh, that could be like cast form. That like makes sense because it's that you wait, you said it's ability?
It's an ability. Yep.
I think I'm gonna go with cast form.
Okay, and is just cast form. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they all have the same ability, right?
They do. Yeah. So that is it. It's the cast form
Let's
ability.
go.
So I'm not going to make you try to guess whether it's sunny form, snowy form, rainy form, or just cast form. But if you have 8 or more stadium cards in the discard pile, ignore all energy in this Pokemon's attack cost. So, which I've talked about that enough that you may have it would help you jog your memory there. But good job.
Yeah, I think it's the only I didn't know that, but what was it again? Weather what?
Weather
What?
reading,
Okay, yeah, I
which is a
because
funny
it's
name for it.
yeah, it's really the only weather Pokemon that I can think of,
Hmm.
like very specifically weather. But I actually have one more. So if you're especially if you're playing at home, the playing along at home, the others weren't that hard. This one I think is harder, and
Okay.
also I'll say if you guess this one, you win.
Okay.
And yeah,
It's that tough. All right.
yeah, and the attack name is Pull.
Pull.
Yeah, Pull.
Wow. Huh. Pull. What could that be? Um all right, pull. So am I pulling something what would I be pulling? All right, I'm just gonna go say Togekiss VMAX because you get to search for. No, you search for. Well, I'll just say Togekiss VMAX,
No, all the
and I'm pretty sure
VMAXs
that's not it.
have the name have Max in their name.
In all
Attack.
the attacks. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Some are Gmax, but no, this is Cacturn from Battle Styles. It just pretty much gusts your
right.
opponent.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I was like looking at Pokemon, and for some reason, this one wasn't on any other Pokemon. So, yeah, you did not get it. I comment down if you're watching this on YouTube or something, or in whatever platform. Comment down below if you got that, because I bet none of you got that. I bet none of you got that.
Yeah. So you don't think you would have pulled that one off if I had asked that?
Oh, wow, you're so clever there.
Good. Oh, yeah. So, but all right, good job, and you won the competition this week there. So good job there. So I guess the second thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about our reasonably effective card of the day or card of the podcast, the way however one wants to do it, and we're going to talk about Eternatus. So Eternatus VMAX
Yep.
and the decks it works with. Right, so a couple reasons why Eternatus relevant now. One, rotations coming up, a couple months off, but good time to think about some of these things we'll be losing. And then also this week, the Battle Pass on Live Reset and Eternatus is one of the free decks. It's, I believe, on the Premium Battle Pass. It's the first deck you get there. So so people will be getting it maybe that didn't have it before also. And I think it's definitely a reasonably effective card. It was actually the top deck a little bit, but then it fell on hard times soon after that.
Yeah, it was in the cycle where the deck, like every deck would counter the last deck. So the deck in Rebel Clash, the best deck was Dragapult VMAX, which is Psychic type weak to Dark. And then the next deck that came out in Darkness Ablaze was Eternus VMAX, which just obliterated Dragapult completely. And then the set after that, they released actually Colossal VMAX, which wasn't quite strong enough to wipe out Eternus, despite hitting it for weakness. That Colossal wasn't very good. And then we saw we saw Urshifu to wipe out Eternatus the set after that. And then they came out with Shadow Rider, and then they came out with Umbreon to continue the weakness cycle. But Eternus got kind of messed up by Urshifu. That was pretty bad.
And I think when it first came out, it was obviously very tanky, right? Was it probably the biggest HP at the time at 340?
It still is, but
okay, nothing's bigger than that, right?
Mm.
And the attack cost of just 2 energy, not bad, and it could get up with its Dread End attack. It was 30 per dark Pokemon in play. In this Eternal Zone ability, you could get 8 on your bench, so 9 Pokemon potentially, so 270, which would pretty much take out. Would that take out every tag team GX or no?
Well, no, it comes up short. The amount that the tag teams were like 280 pretty commonly, 270 or 280. But with like something like a Galarian Zigzagoon, which I imagine we'll talk about, that got you there, or there were that was pretty much the way you got there. But it pretty much it was very good against a lot of the tag teams, notably. I don't actually know if there are any specific tag teams it was really good against, but it was like really strong against like Pikarom and stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of early days. It feasted on the tag teams and GXs and tag teams in particular. Then as more Vs and Vmaxes came out, it started to show its weakness, I think.
Yeah, it's so what do you have to say? I guess you can say you're the Eternus expert here, I think.
I am. I got the deck. I mean, at the time I had it, and it was still a good deck. I don't remember the timing, but during Players Cup Season 4, the last one was the first time I got the keys to doing that. And I was playing. I started off with, I think, Mad Party, which didn't go great. After a few games, I realized that was a disaster. Then I tried a Welder box because Welder could be good, but the inconsistency just really, I realized, wasn't good. So then I got the pieces for Eternatus about midway through that, trying to qualify, which I came up short there. But so I got that deck together and played it pretty effectively, I think. So it was obviously I think it was a top deck at that time. So that was my experience, and then would play it on and off on the ladder since then. So it was a very good deck for a while. The top deck for a while. It certainly, Crobat V is one of the key pieces, right? It was essentially the engine, which is probably Eternus's weakness, is outside of Crobat drawing cards for you. You didn't have much engine because there weren't really good draw options in Dark type. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd argue. I mean, yes, that's true.
There were some later, but there wasn't a lot.
Yeah, I think the engine certainly is an issue. I don't think it drew horribly though, because you could play lots of stuff like Research and Marnie, and then for Crobats, and then since then we've seen stuff like, I imagine, Lightheart and Thievul we'll talk about later, which aren't amazing, but they're okay. And then obviously Crobat's really good. We've even seen. I don't want to talk too much about the Pokemon just yet, but I'd argue Eternus actually has a bigger weakness in the fact that it's got like a billion counters out there. It used to be like every new set, like the
Yeah.
best card in the deck, best card in the set was like an Eternus counter. So there were like lots of fighting cards. Notably, probably the biggest counter was Galarian Zapdos V, which literally was like the definition of a counter. It pretty much attacked for only one energy, and
Yeah.
then it hit it for weakness. But you could put a weakness card energy on a turn just at
Hmm.
the time before it rotated. But then Galarian Zapdos V would just get rid of that energy. So it was kind of silly. And then you wouldn't want to, if your opponent was running Galarian Zapdos V and you were running a Eternatus, you just lose. And then also Avery is really bad. Path to the Peak's like horrendously bad because
Right.
not only it shuts off your engine, but it also like reduces your damage. And then we also
Yep.
see Collapse Stadium really bad.
Hmm.
I think there were some others, but there were a lot of really bad Eternatus counters.
That is certainly true. And, I mean, obviously, the chaotic swell would handle Path initially, but once that rotated, Path just you basically lose until you bump the stadium. And there's really not a stadium Eternatus wants generally, so you're just playing some cards in your deck just to bump Path, which isn't a good feeling because you're kind of wasting slots that could be productive. And the other bit bad feeling with Eternatus is hammers. When your opponent flips heads on the hammer, because there's really no. I mean, Dark Patch is more recent. That wasn't around for most of it. So you're only manually attaching one energy per turn. You lose an energy, all of a sudden you're not attacking for a turn, or you're doing Power Accelerator for 30, which gets you another energy on board, but 30 isn't a lot of damage.
Yeah, I think one of the things dealing with Eternus and energy. Well, first of all, Eternus liked to play hammers, which was I think one of the better things about
Yeah, it
it.
helped the deck work for sure.
But then also people tried a few different things. One of I think the worst ones was what's the card? Turbo Patch, yes. Which do you know what that does?
Refresh me.
It's an item on a coin flip. You can accelerate a basic energy from your discard pile to one of your basic Pokemon into play.
Hmm.
So you'd accelerate that to an Eternus V and then attach. But it wasn't particularly. It was very inconsistent. It's just like pretty much like a bad dark patch. So people play that a little, but it was pretty bad. And then we also saw one thing is you talked about Power Accelerator.
Yeah.
Some Eternus builds sometimes they choose to go second. You could do that
Hmm.
and choose to Power Accelerator and get in a better board position with like more supporters.
Yeah.
So that was a valid option, even if they need to hammer off both of your energies, which is possible but not likely. And then one of the combos that came out in Chilling Reign was well, you had Energy Switch, but you had the Galarian Moltres V, which
Right.
yeah,
Hmm.
that allowed you to power yourself up. And then that was I think more consistent, and people still play that sometimes. And so I'd say its energy issue is bad, but it's not like that bad. And also hammers have like decreased over time.
Yeah.
Uh, but at one point they were pretty crushing hammer to it.
Yes, it did. But look, there's negatives, but the deck had positives for it, obviously too. It as you mentioned, you could if you went second, you would want a Power Accelerator. Now you had to have two energies in hand that turn, one to attach and one to attach it with the attack to accelerate, which that wasn't always easy to pull off on turn one. But it could go second and still be okay, even though I think it was better to go first. But there were people that argued. I think there were debates about which was better. So it's good having a deck that is okay first or second. Hiding when I want to mention hiding dark energy was really good for the deck. It allowed you to switch in and out freely, which certainly also helped pair with some of the other attackers. The Galarian Moltres V, like you said, that once that came out, that was a must include in the deck. It could power itself up, and then also you could use Energy Switch sometimes to power up an Eternatus also. That was kind of deciding on the build. You want to put pieces in like that into your deck, but that would give you some options. Because often it was that energy I found was the big issue, or even once your VMAX got knocked out, if you didn't have an energy already on an Eternatus V, you were like, uh-oh, what do I do this turn?
Yeah. I think it can be vulnerable. One of the things I think about Eternus and card design, which I think we'll probably talk about this later as well,
Mm-hmm.
but it only can really, in my opinion, work for dark Pokemon. maybe some of the stronger types. And in our last podcast, episode 0, I guess, I don't know what we're going to be like naming and numbering these, but
Yeah.
we talked about what the best type is, and Dark is one of the best types,
Yeah.
not because of Eternus, but because of a lot of other things. But Eternus has so many options and that
Yeah.
provide different benefits. Notably, we see Galarian Zigzagoon, we see Weezing, some of the older original ones. We also saw there was a Yveltal pre-rotation, and
Right.
there are a few Koopas. There was also Yveltal GX. Something you want to say?
Yeah, no, the Yveltal, which I don't remember what that attack did right now, but that was one I
Discarded
played.
special energy.
Was that the one that the deck played? Was there? I think there was a different one, wasn't there too? I don't remember.
No, this one that also discarded special energy.
Okay, and then the Hoopa, like you said, that which was one that had to swing in from your bench, so hiding dark energy was usually necessary for that. You would play nets too, because the goons, you'd want to scoop those up, but the Hoopa would swing in for 90 for one. That was sometimes a in between a turn. It's just is to get some damage in. It was useful.
Yeah, I think the Hoopa was pretty solid, but and then there have also been some newer ones like a few V stars. The what's it called?
Well, there's Darkrai.
Yeah, Darkrai is into Hisuian and Samurott.
Yep.
And then we've also seen Umbreon VMAX, right? That usually sees play in the deck.
Yeah, that was a big plus when that came out. The attack, really, you didn't want to attack with it because Eternus was better, but that ability, once again, another V Pokemon's ability or VMAX ability to gust up to a boss without using your supporter was nice to have.
Yeah, honestly, Umbreon I think should see more play. It is potentially really, really good, but obviously Path hurts a lot of those options as well. And then we've seen Liepard, which I think is pretty solid. It's a discard 1, draw 2. But it's also an evolution, so you're committing a lot of. I guess one of the other issues, you're committing a lot of deck space to get all these Pokemon into play.
Right.
And so you're gonna be filling up your Pokemon and your decks with Pokemon, and they're not necessarily gonna provide a lot of value most of the time. They're just gonna kind of sit there and not do much.
Yeah, it's a good right. You got to have a lot of Pokemon, a lot of more deck space than most. You got 4 Eternus Vs, 3 V Maxes. You're going to play 4 Crobat Vs because that ability is just so good for the deck. You're going to play multiple Galarian Weezings, like you mentioned. Galarian Zigzagoons to get the damage down. Then you need some nets with that and a few other Pokemon too. So it gets tricky. I mentioned in there Galarian Weezing. Did you mention that before?
I think so.
I think you did, but that's kind of the way to play it now. Partly it helps the fact that Eternus can be a little clunky to get going, so it's a way to slow your opponent sometimes besides hammers. And then I also tried it out with Thievel, a stage 1 card, single prizer. When you play it, each player shuffles their hand and draws 4. And I actually think that wasn't bad in the deck. No one else played it that way, but I think it was a legitimate option because especially if you got Path, then you had no way to no engine. So this gave you an option, a card you could search for with an Evo Incense or something and see some fresh cards, and a way to disrupt your opponent too.
Yeah, it's an interesting option. I don't think it's particularly good. It doesn't provide a lot of value. It provides just a little bit. Maybe if you're running 4 goons and lots of nets, I could see it. But there's also I'm looking at it right now, but it's on different Thievel from Astral Radiance. It says its ability baffling if your opponent has 2 or fewer prize cards remaining. Whenever your opponent places a Porter from their hand, prevent all effects done to your bench Pokemon V. This covers another one of the issues of Eternus, that you have 4 Crobats in play all the time, so they can just pick off 3 Crobats at any time if they have the Boston capability. This Thievel could theoretically stop that. I don't know. It seems like a bunch of pieces that you probably won't be able to set up in addition to your Eternus, but it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, the Crobat Vs, that definitely is one of the weak points of the deck, because 2 prizes that most games you're not attacking with, so that the HP is not that high at 180. So now that you could take advantage if your opponent threw down a Path to clear out their Crobat, so that was definitely something that was there. But the other potential draw engine, which I think I tried a little bit, but it just takes a lot of deck space, is the Zubat, Golbat, Crobat line. but getting to it's a lot of Pokemon to take. But when you play down the Golbat, you draw 2. When you lay down the Crobat, you draw 3. Again, it's just another way to try to get cards. Especially, there are certain times in the meta when Path to the Peak was like in every deck at certain times, and then Eternus was just struggling to find something.
Yeah, so I think this is again a very. I think this is probably one of the weakest, if not the weakest, like Dark Draw engine
Hmm.
because it like takes up so much space, as you said. Um, so
Yeah,
I
it,
think
it wasn't a great option. Uh,
yeah, I've seen people like I think it's seen playing like other stuff, but generally it's pretty bad.
Yeah, and that the other card I want to mention in this, which is a card that I really loved in this deck, and you mock me on a regular basis, and that's the supporter Piers. And I think I see you're grumbling about it and groaning about it now, but I know you've played it sometimes, right? Because Piers searches for a dark Pokemon and 1 energy, so it's really about the only one of the few cards that let you search for a special energy in particular. So when you want to get a hiding dark energy, your Piers gets you that, and of course you only have darkness Pokemon, so searching for that is always a good thing too.
Yeah, I don't think Piers belongs in Eternatus. As I've said on numerous occasions to you, it's an okay card, but when you don't have any draw engine, it's pretty bad because you're just not drawing cards that turn. Then probably you could grab like Crobat, but you'd rather play like Research or Marnie or Boss. Pretty much you need Research, Marnie, or Boss every turn. Piers provides some value in the deck, but it doesn't belong in Eternatus. I stand by that statement, and I think most people don't play it in Eternatus either. Its ability to search special energy is really nice, but at the same time, like you don't really need the special energy in Eternus. Sure, you can get capture and obviously hiding dark, but hiding dark I don't even think is that good in the deck, especially if you want a power accelerator. Like you're not really gonna be retreating much, so I don't think it provides a ton of value in the deck.
Well, there are a couple things with hiding dark. One is if you're playing glare and wheezing, when you to get that, if you're getting a point that your opponent can't attack with it, and you're poisoning, you need to switch out. You're always right. Glaring Wheezing, I think, is a multi-prize. The retreat cost, I think, is high on that.
Yeah, it's 3, but I don't. I've never been in a spot where I'm like, I have too much control in this game. Like, I don't think you really want to retreat out your Weezing. You just like keep it there until it dies and hope it. Maybe you'll like want to do it to get a big KO, but
Hmm.
realistically, having Weezing in the active for as long as possible is usually good.
All right, maybe you're right. So, but look, I mean, I think Eternatus fits under this category of reasonably effective. It's still, I mean, you can play it now, right? It's not. There are a lot better choices, and I think it's a bit odd that Pokemon's putting it on the Battle Pass on Live at this point. But it's a reasonable choice, is what I'd say. It's been a
Yeah.
and it's been it was obviously it was super effective for a while, and then became reasonably effective for a long period of time, I think, and it's probably fallen off a little more now.
Yeah, I think there are a few things we still need to talk about. One,
Yeah.
right now, if you're playing it, obviously you said Weezing, you probably play with Radiant Hisuian Sneasler,
Hmm.
which people sometimes always think is good in Weezing. It's not. It actually hurts the math a lot of the time. But generally, like in Eternatus, Radiant Hisuian Sneasler adds to the Weezing if you just want to go hardcore into Weezing and just do big damage. So that's kind of important.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how you play it, right? You just do Weezing and Crobat and Eternus.
I think to play now, I think yes. And there aren't any other dark radiant Pokemon, correct?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So, um, whether that Hisuian Sneasler's really adds that much to the deck or not, I'm not sure. Um, you could probably potential argue that you might leave it out. I don't know. I haven't played a lot of Eternus lately. They've given it to us on live, and I'm doing more live than you are, so I'm sure I'm going to be messing around with Eternus more again.
Yeah. So I think then one last thing that actually I think is
Yeah.
very important. That's a bit weird, but it's the question: why isn't it good now? And do you have like an answer to that?
Yeah, that's a good question because obviously 340 HP is still really big, and fighting Pokemon aren't dominant now, so therefore the weakness isn't going to crush the deck now, and Path isn't that high, isn't crazy high now. Um, so maybe the deck is better placed than it's actually seeing play. What do you think?
So I think it's a bit weird. I think I should probably be seeing a bit more. Actually, it's still seeing a solid chunk of play right now, but notably it's being carried by Weezing.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing that's holding Eternus back is the fact that it puts so many Pokemon to play, and then it's very vulnerable. Also, there's a solid chunk of Path. I think a lot of decks, maybe a third of the decks right now, are playing Path, which is not great for Eternus.
Yeah.
But I think that there are a lot of very versatile decks. Notably, we see Lost Box, which is
Hmm.
not very good for Eternus because they could theoretically KO you, but also they can hit the bench. They can just do a lot of stuff that you can't really combat too well, and they trade pretty well with you. Well, you're not versatile at all. And then Lugia, which can one shot you, like
Yeah.
pretty much. I don't know if all builds of Lugia can, but like you Volatile, Amazing Rare will one shot you, and it's just not good. I think a lot of other decks are very like adaptable, and Lost Box can throw in counters. Lugia can throw in counters. Then the rest of the decks just like Eternatus isn't hitting exactly the right numbers right now. It can be
Yeah.
good if you're against like, well, I don't know, I was gonna say Arceus, but Arceus often bumps its HP above that threshold by using Big Charm, Radiant Gardevoir, like Acuity, some other stuff that I don't remember. And then
Right.
like it's not good against Palkia because you just pack your bench so they can just mess you up.
Yeah.
And then it's not good against what are the other good decks? I don't know, but I don't think it's good against them. I
Yeah.
guess it's good against Control though. But well, they can gust you though, so it's probably not actually good against Control.
Right. You have too many Pokemon. You can't spread around your energies to deal with it. So you're vulnerable there. Yeah. I mean, at 270 damage cap, that's not enough in today's game, especially on a three prize Pokemon. That's just not where you
Yeah,
want to be.
yeah. I think three prizes have actually been kind of phased out some,
Hmm.
which I think they're like a lot of the two prizers just hit numbers you want. You're really looking to play like a V Star. It's enough HP to survive most hits, but not everything. But if you go down, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And Eternus doesn't necessarily one shot the V Stars, and it will not trade well with most of them. So I'd say Eternus just like struggles. It's not horrible, and you can play it right now, but I think it's lacking. And I think, do you think it's time to move into the next segment? I think it's
Yeah. I
time.
think we covered Eternus enough for today. So it's reasonably effective, but you certainly have better choices.
Yeah. So I think the um the next topic that we're going to be talking about is Pokemon V's, which includes the basic V's, the V Stars, the V Maxes, and also V Unions, which are a pretty small part. But that's why I think that's a good transition because
Yep.
Turner's V Max used to be very good, and all the V Maxes used to be very dominant. But right now, V Maxes aren't that good. They're certainly okay. Some are pretty solid, but it's been kind of weird, a weird cycle where we saw basic Vs and then we
Yeah.
saw V Max is completely dominant and now V Stars. And so, what are your takes on the Vs as a whole? And also, do you think they're like interesting? What do you think about them?
These have been okay, is the general take, but not great. Not a big fan of the V Max, and that the three prizes I think is a little bit overbearing for things. Which the GXs, the tag teams were also, but the V Maxes have been around for the entire 3 year period, where the tag teams just came in at the last year, and I do think the V Stars have been a positive move. So, um, they compare to GXs in one sense. They're both multi prizes, two prizes, or three prizes. They're different in that the GXs were final form only, where you had the interesting thing of evolving from a single prizer. The VMAX is only evolved from Vs, and obviously, until the V Stars, there wasn't its own special mechanic like the GX mechanic and now the V Star mechanic.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one thing people say, I think three pressures can be okay, but
Hmm.
the VMAXs are, yeah, well, the tag teams were a bit interesting in the fact that they had pretty unique attacks. Nothing crazy, but we saw, well, ADP and Luke Metal were certainly
Hmm.
unique. I enjoyed personally ADP. I know most people did not personally enjoy ADP, but I enjoyed it. And then those were all pretty interesting and did unique mechanics. They usually had three attacks, sometimes two, but overall they were cool.
Yep.
But then we saw VMAXs, and they're not cool. Like we were talking about Eternus. Eternus is pretty straightforward. Certainly, the way you build the deck can be interesting, but Eternus in itself, just play dark Pokemon, attach energy, do damage, um,
Right.
tank damage, and then we saw very similar things, especially with the earlier VMAXs. So Centiskorch VMAX is one of the better ones, just does damage.
Mm-hmm.
Dragapult VMAX, pretty straightforward, does spread, but it still just does damage. Italian
Yeah.
VMAX just does damage. We saw, what else? We saw Colossal just does damage, pretty straightforward. We saw Urshifu got a bit more interesting with spread.
Right.
And
The
then the
battle
other,
styles, I think, were a big plus for the Vs and the VMAXs.
yeah, I think they added, but I don't think they like made them super interesting. I think Rapstick Urshifu VMAX though was interesting a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. And then I think and that like second year of VMAXs became a bit more interesting. However, a lot of them still weren't that interesting. I think the first set where we actually got VMAXs with like interesting like support, you could say, was Chilling Reign, where we finally saw Shadow Rider Calyrex. Except that it was like super strong, so it wasn't actually interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then your
Overpowering.
opponent would like, yeah, and then you paired it with these tag teams that are stop your opponent from playing the game, and so it got kind of not fun. But then we also saw, you saw Umbreon VMAX with an ability, and then we've seen Kyurem VMAX and a few more VMAXs that have become more interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
VMAXs early were the most boring Pokemon like ever, and they were just so good that they were the Pokemon you had to play, and they made the games just very straightforward. And also a few things they prioritized going first. Like going first, the VMAX
Yeah.
is pretty much always necessary. And then also they the first person to like attacks, which is very similar to going first, is essentially the winner because
Mm-hmm.
they're pretty straightforward, easy to power up, and there's not really any interesting gameplay. You're just gonna hit into each other until one person wins.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, your point about having wanting to go first is a good one. It does make the game dull. It's better when there's a mix of people that decks that want to go first or second. Because even if you play a basic V deck, you need a bunch of energy, multiple energy to attack. So you can't really do anything turn one anyway, or your VMAX deck. I think that just the basic Vs though were probably the more interesting than the VMAXs maybe over. Like when they came out with Zacian, Zamazenta, they were good cards. I think Zacian was certainly maybe overpowered, but part of that was because it paired so with ADP. But because it took 3 energy, and you had to switch it if it to attack the following turn, so it added some complexity to it. So I think that wasn't bad. Zamazenta walling off VMAXs and discarding special energy is useful. A V like Suicune V, which was a strong card when put in the right deck again. So the Vs probably that didn't evolve, I think, might have been more interesting.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like we saw stuff like Crobat and
Mm-hmm.
Kricketune and Luminion, which are all like
Yeah.
utility, and so they're pretty cool. They see interesting uses. Stuff like Zacian Zamzen you said they're interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like super interesting, but they have
No.
some unique values. Um, and then we also see stuff like Vikavolt, which is very powerful, but it's unique. I don't necessarily love its design, but it's kind of annoying to deal with, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good and it's okay design. And yeah, I'm just like looking at the like Sword and Shield Vs, and they're pretty cool. We see Cramorant V, which is one of the
Oh
most
yeah.
interesting, as well as Sableye. They both have very strong attacks, but also
Mm.
like utility attacks, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see like any of that on almost any of the VMAXs. And there are a few more Vs. A bunch of them aren't that good, but they're still interesting, and they provided like very solid value, which I don't think the VMAXs. The VMAXs were either really like they were all like super overpowered, I think, and then they also kind of like ruled out the Vs because the
Yeah.
VMAXs all just one shot the Vs and then like traded positively, and it wasn't really viable to play a V unless it was like Zacian, which
Right.
had or Zamzenta, which had a lot of synergies.
Yeah, the V Maxes tended to overpower the Vs and make them not so relevant. Because I'm looking like it when I've played some Delmise V Max, which you never liked, but it does 240 for 3, kind of a very vanilla V Max at 330 HP. But it's tough for a V to compete with that, right? Because it's gonna one shot a V, and it just shuts things down with a relatively boring deck and Pokemon like Delmise. And then you have like maybe the ultimate and boring is you have Victini VMAX, right? You just play your Victinis, and that might be all you put in the deck.
Yeah, I don't think Victini VMAX is horribly designed. I think the deck was like really boring, but the card is it's not the worst design. It's like average design for all the VMAXs. They all just like hit damage, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Victini it even has a moderately interesting first attack here, allowing you to accelerate energy, which is fine, but again, very generic. And pretty much you do what you do, and it's very coin flip dependent on who wins the coin flip. Also, a lot of them are
Hmm.
notably pretty vulnerable to Crushing Hammer, so everyone would just play Crushing Hammer to try to stop the VMAXs. Like pretty
Yeah.
much all of them are 2 energy for big damage on a essentially like a stage 1 Pokemon with absurd amounts of HP. So it was like, do you set up and then do you go first? And so it was pretty boring.
Yeah, and anything that encourages more crushing hammers, I don't think is a good thing. So, I've played them obviously like with the Eternatus because it made the deck better, but even then, I just don't like hammers even if I'm playing it. It's just not a good feeling. But
Yeah.
I do think the V stars were a big improvement on the V maxes though, and brought a lot more interest to the game.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. I imagine. Well, you like Arceus, right? You're a big fan of that one.
yeah, Arceus is really nice. It's obviously very versatile because it's colorless in its attack, so it can use any energy and it can power up any other V. So I mean, right now, I guess is the high point for Arceus. We have all the Vs have been released, or I don't know if there's one or two special ones, but they're all about to be out. So, and obviously its ability is very good. Maybe too might be too good. If someone wants to argue that, I might agree with that, but accelerating. It gives you any option to set up. You're bringing it back down to 2 prizes. I think is a plus. You still want to evolve to the V Star, and having the V Star mechanic itself is good. You either have the attack or the ability, but only once per game. I think it just makes things a little more interesting, and with the V Star mechanic, it gives you a little thought pause if you want to bring together different V stars because you can only use that mechanic once per game. Uh,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the issues with the V stars, well, there are a
mm-hmm.
few. One, I think they're a bit too powerful. I guess they were kind of doing that in a almost it's power creep, but it's also like reverse power creep in the fact that it reduced the V maxes, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Or sorry, yeah, the V maxes, which I think is kind of nice. People are kind of fed up, and they certainly we've been kind of ragging on them. They weren't like that bad, but they weren't enjoyable.
Yeah.
And then they came out with Arceus, which is very good. And then, in my opinion, some of the not interesting ones being we saw the Palkia V-Star, which is super boring in my opinion, and Lugia V-Star, which is also some minorly interesting deck building. But man, that card's just so good with Archeops. I'm almost gonna lump in. I'm scrolling through the VMAXs. The one card that almost gets lumped in with that year is Mew VMAX, being not obviously a V-Star, but it's grouped in with that
Yeah.
the group of Pokemon oftentimes being overpowered. One other thing that I think I don't like about the design of both the V Stars and the V Maxes, which has been pretty true for almost all of them. It's if you're playing a V Star or V Max, the basic V is almost always underwhelming. We see Arceus
Yeah.
V being okay, good I guess, but not like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess Mew V is okay. There've been some okay Vs that evolved, but nothing particularly, no like solid Vs with good V Maxes.
Yeah. Arceus V, I guess, might be an exception because it can accelerate energy, which is useful. Um, that's not doing damage, but at least you're setting up. But most of the Vs are like you don't really want them on the board at all. You want to get to the evolution immediately as quick as you can, and that's certainly true. Things like Regidrago V Star, I think throws in an interesting option. Gudra V Star again, not bad. The Lugia, that one certainly is with Archeops is probably overpowered, and it's also very random. Do you set up or not? And then once you set up, you're almost invincible. So, which makes for uninteresting gameplay for me. Um, So yeah, I mean the V Stars didn't save the game, and they probably have too much HP for where they are. But I think they needed that to compete with the V Maxes. Is might be what they were thinking.
Yeah, and then one other issue with the V Stars, but I do think overall they're pretty well designed. Is that the V-Star powers, comparing them to GX attacks,
Hmm.
which are they're pretty similar. V-Star powers are a little bit better because they can be used as abilities sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, Stuff like Arceus, pretty much all. Yeah, I think all the good V-Stars, except for I guess Giratina, which isn't even that good. Um, all you had like abilities as the V-Star power, and then they were pretty much always used early, which is I think not as interesting.
Hmm.
With the GX attacks, you wouldn't necessarily use it early on. Sometimes like ADP and Luke Metal, you'd try to use it early on.
Right.
Even with Luke Metal, you wouldn't always because you're aiming to like discard energy sometimes. You played Luke Metal a lot. Did you use it early or did you sometimes
Yeah,
wait?
I'd want to get it set up early for the protection and the tankiness. You want to pull off the GX attack and then go from there usually. So yeah. Um,
Okay, but still, I think like the fact that you use V-Star powers early almost always isn't very fun. A lot of decks with GX attacks, especially the earlier GXs, really would use them at different points. They wouldn't have to use it early. And so it was really interesting. But
mhm.
now it's just like, oh, I'm Arceus turn two. Usually
Right.
start with turn two. Me, pretty much always turn two. The Lugia, you always want to use it as early as possible.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the V-Star powers, you just want to pop off and then just do it. Especially now that you like get ahead, you just win. And so it's not. It's a bit boring in my opinion.
Yeah, getting it set up quickly is so key. I mean, with Palkia, one could use it strategically, potentially, but getting ahead is so key. Because, like, the one exception to that I think is Dialga, which takes, what, 5 energy on it, so you couldn't use it early. But because you couldn't use it early, the problem is you can fall behind and just lose the game before you get to your V Star power attack.
Yeah, and I think Dialga still your game really starts when you use your V-Star power. Like if you you if you could, you'd use your V-Star power like turn one or turn two, but
Right.
you just can't. You're trying to do it as quickly as possible still. I think like I thought Arceus was going to be really interesting, and I think other people are talking about this as well. You'd wait till later on to use your V-Star power
Hmm.
to be like guaranteed game or something, but then Path to the Peak just shuts that down. It removes that interesting option. I think some of the more interesting ones, stuff like Leafeon V Star with its gusting ability,
Hmm.
you'd want to use. You could save for later on, and it like feels okay. I'm looking here, pretty much all the other ones that you want to use early, or you like don't use at all. So yeah, I think most of these are pretty boring.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's a fair point. The abilities you're using them early, and again, you're turboing, setting up, and just going fast and going hard. And you either set up and win, or you struggle and you're just out of the game quickly. Which is boring play, right? We want to allow the game to play, to develop, and people make choices, some skill, and some different paths to victory. I think that's what makes interesting gameplay.
yeah, I think there's one thing that we haven't been talking about
Hmm.
though, which debatably we don't really need to talk about, but I think it's something that we should. It's the V unions, which are an interesting
Yeah, yeah. I
mechanic.
realized when I was looking through, we forgot those. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was waiting. They're the fourth and final piece, which are
Yeah.
not necessarily they're only like what are there five of them? Are there six of them? I think there's five, right?
I'm not sure technically. Now, was it actually the final one, or didn't they come out before the V Stars? I don't remember
Oh,
the
well, yeah, the
timing.
final one we're talking about though.
No, okay, but not in terms of release.
No, they were before V Stars. Not all of them, but I don't think. But so notably, people at first were saying, talking about the V Union mechanic and saying that they were really bad. The V Unions were just unplayable
Mm,
because you can only play one of each piece. So if it's prized, that's really bad for you. You have to you can't really build around one V Union because if it's prized, you just lose.
yeah.
And then you can't really tech it in either because it's a V Union. It's so awkward. You're never gonna get it off. There was also before we had Ultra Ball, which meant that you'd like never be able to search them out. But luckily we've
Right.
gotten Ultra Ball. But actually that's changed because Mewtwo Reunion is one of the best decks in the game right now, and so it's a control deck though, but it's still very solid. And then you can even attack with it with
Hmm.
Arceus. It like kind of sets up, and then what are the other ones? I think the other ones are all bad,
Yeah,
but
there's Pikachu, um, Greninja. And then you got Zacian, and you got Morpeko.
yeah, and none of them are that good. I think Greninja is probably the second best, but have you played with any of them?
No, I haven't. And this is like another problem with the V unions, and particularly with the V unions and PTCGO in terms of getting and trading. You're trading for four separate cards, and like you can go on Trader Hill and see the prices, and the prices for all the pieces aren't the same. And a lot of times people don't trade for all four pieces in one trade, so usually at least one piece seems to be very expensive. So it's like, what am I supposed to do here? So I've never picked them up, and obviously until Mewtwo kind of became in vogue as a control thing, none of them were particularly good. So I don't have them in live though. You can purchase the in-store boxes in the store for the credits that the crystals that you get earn in the game. So it's actually going to be more affordable and easier to get in live. So I think I'm going to pick up the Mewtwo V Union in live at some point.
Yeah, so I think, and so Mewtwo's obviously the only good one. The
Yeah.
Greninja's maybe okay, but not that good. And the rest are pretty trash. You could theoretically compare both Lightning ones together, but I played against it, and it never works. So, but the Mewtwo actually works, I think, with Arceus, with Ultra Ball, there it can
Hmm.
actually set up, and I still don't think they're that well designed because they're just, I don't know, like you can't resummon them either, which is kind of strange. Like
Yeah.
realistically, if you've already like got it and it's died, you've already given up three prizes. I feel like it's not overpowered if you can resummon it. Obviously, you just get it back, but it's lost all its energy, and they're all really expensive. YouTube Union
Hmm.
usually uses its attack to get the energy back, but it's very slow. So then they just heal off damage for the rest of the game because they're behind. They can't like actually attack. So I'd say they're kind
Hmm.
of interesting.
It,
They're very small. I wish they none of them came out in any main sets, so they're
no.
okay. But
No, it's strange that they go in the discard and you can't, like you said, you can't use it all for a game. It makes sense, like you couldn't. Like, there's certain things you can't do again that turn, but I don't know if there's anything else you can't get from the discard again for a game. It seems like it should go to the lost zone then, if they don't want you to get it back. That would just make it simpler. Um,
yeah, I would that would be cool.
and the other thing, I think these were just a gimmick from Pokemon. They weren't really intended to be serious cards, and I think then a control player sat down and figured out a way to use these things that pieces that Pokemon figured would never be playable and put together something that can make everyone's lives miserable, which is kind of what control players do, right? They sit down with look at these garbage cards and say, how can I put together something that makes the game unenjoyable for everyone else?
Yeah, maybe that's
And they
yeah.
do a good job at that. So I'm not. It's not a criticism.
Yeah, I do play control as well. I was recently looking at Crown Zenith and I saw this like really cool card that like looked really bad that I could put in a control deck. So yeah, maybe I should have named the garbage attack, referenced myself with that. But I think they're okay design. They're, as you said, they're like a gimmick, which is fine. So if they're like they're not overpowered, which is good. Like if they're
Yeah,
random and overpowered, that would have been really bad.
that's true.
But I think they're fine. So overall, so let's compare, I guess, V's to like previous stuff because both of us, well, we both started playing seriously around when Sword and Shield came out. So
Yeah.
you don't have experience with, you have a little bit with GXs, mostly just tag teams, though, right?
Yeah, mostly tag teams. I mean, that first year, like I played a lot of welder decks because that was there. So there were tag teams, and then like Luke Metal, I played that for a while too. So it was kind of that hybrid of GXs with some V Pokemon, and actually I enjoyed that overlap. And I'm hoping things are interesting again with Vs and EXs. But so I just played the GXs that were basic Pokemon that you can put into play directly, not the ones that evolve from single prize Pokemon. You played a little bit of those though, right? Or
I
not?
don't
Not
know.
really.
I played Incineroar GX, but that was pretty bad. So but we played with like the Worlds to actually
Yeah.
played. I mean, and it's not like we started playing at Sword and Shield. We played with EXs as well, the capital EXs, which were pretty
Hmm.
boring to be honest. But Literally V's are just the capital EXs, which is it's whatever. I mean, they're not quite the same, but they're very similar ideas and
Yeah.
still very boring. But we see that the GXs I think were much more interesting. The
Hmm.
stuff like what
Well, the
Decidueye GX.
GXs had the whole. Well, I'm thinking tag teams. They had the whole tag team package. Maybe they're more like obviously the V Stars, but they're also kind of like the battle styles too. That they're a little package of things that work together.
Well, that was one card tag call.
Well, then you had the tag team supporters also, right?
Well, yeah, but the
That
like really the only
in the
thing that
book.
like pulled them together was I think there was
Yeah, tag
tag
call.
call and then there was a Mawile that like did something. It was really bad, but I think it interacted. There might
Hmm.
have been another card, but pretty much the tag team mechanic didn't really have to do with tag teams. It was just like basics that were really strong
Yeah.
and did like absurd amounts of damage. Actually, no, they just had like weird effects that were really strong. But overall, the regular GXs were really fun. I think Zorag
Hmm.
GX was good, maybe not the most balanced, but also Decidueye GX is probably one of my
Yeah.
favorite cards ever. I'm a sucker for Decidueye, obviously, but
Hmm.
I think Decidueye GX pretty fun. We also saw Glatespod GX pretty cool. We still saw some boring GXs. I'd say Gardevoir GX very boring. Uh, but there were some really like pretty generic but pretty fun ones. Like the two Alolan Ninetales GXs were both pretty cool. Um, I guess the one GX that you evolved to, I don't think you played this, but this was played as an Eternus counter, Lycanroc GX.
Hmm.
Do you remember that one?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, pretty much its attack like one shot Eternus, I think. So I played with Dragapult, and then you would it's when you evolved into it, you discard a special energy. It was pretty okay. Um, but overall, I'd say like GXs were a better design mechanic. The Vs overall, I think the V Maxes were pretty bad. Would you agree with me? That
Yeah, and I think if you compare the tag team GXs to the V Maxes, I take the tag team. Some of those are more interesting. Love it or hate it, like ADP was interesting. Mewtwo and Mew was certainly very interesting and such. They were better cards than than the V Maxes.
yeah, like the ones that we saw to replace Mewtwo Mew, we saw like Mew V Max, which is literally just like Zacian 2. So
Yeah.
it's I don't think most of them were very well designed. There are Mew V Max is honestly okay designed as like a toolbox, but it's a toolbox with like four tools in it, so it's not that interesting. And then we see, I think the basic V's are okay, right? They're not particularly amazing, but there are some we've seen some solid ones.
Yeah, I think there's a good amount of well designed Vs. You know, in terms of probably an overpowered card, thinking the Dene GX was probably a very overpowered card and probably badly designed, right? Everybody played it. It was a great card, but probably just too
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It fits very well with my mentality of go fast, go hard sometimes, but well, I also play control, but the Dene is a fun card, but certainly overpowered. I think pretty much all the Vs have been balanced. Maybe Zacian was a bit too good for the time, but since then it's kind of balanced out. And I think we've seen some
Yeah.
amazingly designed ones like Suicune, right? And
Hmm.
Entei. You like Entei a lot. And you like Suicune, right?
Yeah, I like them both. I actually probably like Entei more, but it just hasn't been very effective,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And then the V stars. Would you say the V stars are better or worse designed than the Vs, like
Um,
basic Vs?
okay, that's a good question. Because I definitely think they're better designed than the V Maxes, but um, they're probably about even with them, I guess. Because the V star mechanic isn't, as you said, as exciting as probably it could be.
Okay, I'd say that's a pretty weak answer, but whatever. I'll probably say uh, they are very close, but I'd say the V stars, I guess, are a bit more interesting with the V star powers. They bring like a new mechanic, and I think um, we've seen some pretty interesting V stars that I imagine we'll see more play. They have some interesting like attacks, like Alolan Vulpix V star, Mawile V
Hmm.
star. Um, there are a bunch of really interesting ones. Magnezone V star. I played that, and that is really fun. They're a bit underpowered, the more interesting ones, but they're interesting. And in terms of Vs, we haven't seen too much that's not crazy, but we've seen. I think they're both pretty well designed. Um, and then V unions, I think, are just whatever. You can kind of put them to the side, right?
Yeah, just forget about them, which is what we mostly do. I think when you're talking about the V stars with some of these underplayed V stars, because well, Arceus is just so good. Palkia was big for a while, but Arceus is still just it's hard to get around that. Obviously, we have Lugia V star now too, but these other V stars, as you start to have EXs in the game, and then you can it'll open up space for these other V star Pokemon, I think, to fit in.
Yeah.
As you have a
Uh,
V star and an EX and are using both of them together.
yeah, you got your favorite Rotom V star as well, which is
I do like that. So, but I know it's that may fit under a reasonably effective heading. I'm not sure.
yeah.
It's
But so I
not
think
better than that.
no. Anything else you want to wrap up with here, though?
No, I think well, we're at the end of this 3-year block, and we both have been playing throughout this entire block. So so this is the first time. Rotation last time I was very new to the game, so now rotation's hitting, and
Oh
so
no,
it's
last time was
well,
Pog 2.
yeah.
No,
But
the
we
first time rotation was when you joined the game.
oh I know, this
Oh,
is
so,
the
okay.
first time rotating an entire block or whatever one wants to call it, the entire Sword and Shield block. Right now we have it in play. We're only losing obviously the first year of that, but we're leaving a block now, so it's a change in that regard. And I think the V's have been good, but it's good to move on to. And but we're going to keep the V stars, which are probably the best part of it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and we're leaving some of those boring VMAXs, like Eternus, which isn't that boring, but it's not that interesting. So
Right.
I'm excited for rotation, I guess. Realistically, we're not losing that much. Surprisingly, we're losing Marnie, but I don't think people are really sad to see that go. It's kind of annoying. And then we're losing. I was gonna say we're losing Crushing Hammer, but we're not. So
I know there was
it's-
hope there. I was hoping, but no. And it's the engine cards that we're losing, right? That's probably those are going to be the big changes in the game, I
yeah,
think.
like Inteleon. I think that's pretty much the most meaningful by far.
Yeah. Well, and we're losing all the special energies, and that's going to cripple a bunch of decks. Whether they print new special energies, I guess we'll have to
Yeah.
see down the road.
Oh no. Guess we won't be seeing as much Lugia. That's unfortunate.
We can only hope, right? And you're not going to be able to play your Reggie's deck so effectively.
Oh no. Okay, so yeah, I think that's all for
Okay.
today, though. Um, I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Dan, anything you want to say?
No, I think that wraps it up for us, and just have a good week and enjoy some good games of Pokemon.
Yep. And because you didn't want to say it, I guess I'll take the opportunity to plug my channel then. Subscribe to 10 Types, and then yeah, I guess you can check out Uncommon Fossil too, and then also comment below what you think of this podcast if you're listening to it on YouTube, and if we figure out how to get this podcast on not YouTube, do whatever, follow, comment. Like I have no idea, but
Yeah, let
I
us
hope you.
if you want to, if it's important to you to get up this podcast actually as a podcast on a podcast app. Let us know, because we certainly we can figure that out.
Maybe. But so yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening, and I hope you have a good day. And we're excited to hopefully continue this podcast and see you next time. See ya.